Thank you very much for coming here today. Today is a huge day for patients across Canada that use or may use cannabis as medicine. Today, the BC Court of Appeal, in a 2-to-1 decision, ruled that the regulations that the federal government uses to monitor the use and distribution of cannabis as medicine are unconstitutional by not allowing patients to make extracts and derivatives from the dried marijuana that they are allowed to use and grow medicinally. It is absurd to think that our government would allow patients to grow cannabis, to smoke cannabis, but to somehow restrict their use of this plant so that they cannot make teas, hash, butter for cookies. Thankfully, 2 out of 3 judges of the Court of Appeal of BC agree with that decision. Thankfully, as of today, patients across Canada can use derivatives of cannabis without fear of prosecution. Now, it is a split decision. It's a 2-to-1 decision, which means that we could be going to the Supreme Court of Canada. In fact, I hope we go all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada, because this matter needs to be clarified, and clarified for good. As I'll read from the decision, Section 143 states, and this is the final statement, I would suspend the effect of this judgment for 1 year to enable the government to enact amendments to the regulatory scheme such that those authorized are permitted to consume cannabis, marijuana, or its derivatives orally, topically, or by inhalation. And so, an interesting nuance in the case is that Owen Smith, the defendant here, was arrested and charged in 2009 with possession of THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, for the purpose of trafficking. THC is the most active chemical in the cannabis plant. As I've said, dried marijuana is allowed, but any derivatives are not. And so Owen filed a constitutional challenge against this flaw in the regulations. Since that time, the government, in their so-called wisdom, has changed the regulatory scheme to a new model. We are now no longer under the old marijuana for medical purpose, or marijuana medical access regulations. We're now under the marijuana for medical purposes regulations. The new regulations do not allow patients to grow their own medicine and force them to buy it off of large, what they call licensed producers. These licensed producers are not allowed to sell cannabis derivatives. However, I would suggest that this statement here was written broad enough to include both the old and the new regulations. They state very specifically that the government has 1 year to enact new regulations to allow for these derivatives. The court, in writing this decision, was fully aware that there was new regulations in effect. That's why they wrote it broadly, because there's no use amending the old regulations if the new ones are in effect. But they can't state that they have to amend the new regulations, in part because the new regulations weren't even before the courts. But it's quite clear here that the government now has 1 year to legally provide access to the products that you see right before you. And so we are very proud and very happy to be the force behind this decision. This decision to allow the use of cannabis extracts goes far beyond Owen and the members of our clubs, but it certainly does mean a tremendous amount to the members and staff and supporters of our club. Continually receiving protection from the courts has given us a sense of safety from the police and the federal law that otherwise would be putting ourselves and our patients at great risk. And so we are very thankful to receive this acquittal. Our club, between this trial and 4 raids in this store, have beaten every single charge that's been laid against us, and we are very happy to continue that winning streak. Where we go from here depends on the federal government. They could appeal this decision, they're quite likely to, in which case it's somewhat up in the air until the Supreme Court of Canada comes down with their final decision. In a way, we would like to see that happen. As it is, if they allow this decision to stand and come up with some regulations that allow patients to use cannabis derivatives, that would be the best thing that our government could do. Patients need access to these products, cannabis extracts, as soon as possible. And so the sooner that they allow that to happen legally, the better.
And how do you see this judgment in moving towards the decriminalization of marijuana?
Well, in the big picture, certainly every time the courts rule that the government is, unconstitutional in the laws, as the members recommend, it bodes well for the general, legalization of cannabis. Decriminalization to me is a lawyer term for job protection. It doesn't allow for the legal sale of anything, so it might cut down some expenditures, but it doesn't allow for, controlled regulation of the products in the market. So yeah, this certainly, bodes well in that favor.
And what about the timing? This is coming right on the heels of Mark Emery returning to Canada. How do you see marijuana activism and those who believe in more freedom, more free use of marijuana? How do you see this moving
This
forward?
has been the most incredible week of my career. This decision is the biggest decision, but coupled with Mark Emery's release, I think there's a newfound sense of freedom, and we are winning here, not just in Canada, but around the world. The United States and Washington State, it's legal right now, not just for medical purposes, but for everybody. Alaska and Oregon this fall will be legalizing it as well. And so the cracks are starting to show in prohibition for sure. And so it's a very exciting week and really great to have the two stories, back to back.
Sorry, can I just get your name first of all and spelling?
Ted Smith, T-E-D-S-M-I-T-H, and I'm simply the founder of the Cannabis Buyers Club, or Victoria Cannabis Buyers Club.
Just a couple questions about oils and extracts. How many people prefer the oils and extracts to actually smoke?
Well, I guess we would have to go more by our membership than the general public. I think if the general public had access, we'd have a lot more members that would prefer to just use these products as opposed to smoking it. I would say right now, and I could defer to some of the staff that work here more, it's probably about 8 to 10% of our members would rely strictly on the food and skin products. It may be getting more than that though, because as time goes on, we're having more and more, cancer patients and stuff that have never smoked that come in here to use these things. So that percentage is certainly increasing.
Have you heard about a lot of people wanting to have the oils and extracts, but and not being able to get access to them?
Oh, definitely, especially across Canada. We have a lot of patients that really, really want access to our products, and we're hoping with this decision to help do that. We have our cookbooks online so people can learn how to make it themselves, but we've really worked very hard on making these natural, home-cooked medicines, and so a lot of people would love to have access to these, but the best we can do is teach them how to do it.
I know you touched on it, but what does today's ruling kind of mean for you guys for medical marijuana and the future?
Well, this means a great deal for the future of medical marijuana in Canada. This is like a new era in medical marijuana. Allowing patients to smoke cannabis is one step. Allowing them to make cannabis derivatives opens up huge possibilities for the use of this medicine. Most people that get diagnosed with cancer and arthritis, they don't smoke cannabis, right? Most cannabis smokers are younger, right? So most people that get diagnosed with serious medical problems, if they are told that, oh yeah, you've got cancer, but you can smoke some pot, well, that's ridiculous for most of them. They don't want to do that. And it doesn't work as well. The effects of cannabis smoke last 20 minutes, peak effect, an hour the most. When you consume it orally or topically, the effects last for 4 to 6 hours. They're a lot more, they're just a lot more beneficial when they're consumed orally and topically for most people. And that's their preferred route.
It doesn't just have an effect on you guys today, but right across the country,
this is huge. I know there's people crying right now at home because their children and their grandparents can use this medicine now without fear of prosecution. I know dozens of children with very serious seizure disorders like Dravet syndrome and stuff that use cannabis derivatives, that their child would literally be dying in front of their eyes without, and now they have functional children that they're starting to talk to, relate with, that couldn't be functional without this cannabis oil. To think that these children would be forced to smoke cannabis if they're using it at all is ridiculous.
For you now, what's your next step? Where do you go from here today?
Our next step is looking at options towards providing our products beyond Victoria, because again, like, people across this country really need these medicines, and we're specialists. We really know what we do, and we worked exceptionally hard to get to this point, and so that's an option certainly that we're looking at. And we want to continue to educate people about how to make their own products safely as well, because the beauty about this medicine is that people can become self-reliant. You know, like, they don't need to be buying prescription drugs and relying on the medical industry if they can grow their own plants and make this medicine in their own kitchens. That's why drug companies fear it so. You know, because this would take away a vast portion of the market if people become self-sufficient. So our goal is to really push our cookbook and really make it so that people are aware that these products are simple, effective, and very easy to make. They don't need to go through a huge drug approval process. Just make it in your backyard.
Going to the Supreme Court of Canada, going through the court process in general is pretty expensive. Where do you get your money?
The money, unfortunately, has come from the membership of the Buyers Club. You know, members here pay a premium for their medicine, partly because of the safety and court costs. Haven't had a lot of donations come in. Now that they've appealed it, I think the majority of costs are covered by the government, but we still will have to pay our lawyer. Luckily, Kurt Tusaw, our lawyer, is amazing and charges us a very reasonable amount of money. He knows it's all coming from our patients, right? So,
what do you think this decision is going to do for public opinion of marijuana users and marijuana use and the benefits of it?
Oh, I think as more people understand the benefits of eating cannabis and the absurdities of these laws, the more people will just be completely tired of it and become even more openly critical of what the government's doing. So I think this is going to bode very well, because it's pointed out what I think is the Achilles heel of the cannabis laws. The fact that, you know, they didn't allow patients to make their own tea and cookies is absolutely absurd. And now Canadians are going to hear just how backwards our government's laws are. It will just be another nail in the coffin.
How do you think this decision will affect medicinal users outside of BC today?
Well, it'll affect people outside of BC tremendously, because there's been a lot of them that have been really scared to make extracts. I'm in contact with 4 or 5 people that have charges right now that have medical licenses to possess and grow cannabis, but they've been caught with a derivative under some circumstance, hashish most commonly. And so there's patients right now that are trying to get a hold of me to figure out how to use this so that their charges will be dropped. A lot of them that, again, have been using it already, that have been worried if they get caught with, you know, in their car or something, that they'll end up being charged and treated like criminals. And there's been a lot of patients, no doubt, holding back as well, because they don't want to take a risk of making these things. So, you know, it's going to affect the people already using it, the people that may use it, and it's going to open up the eyes to a lot of other people to think, hey, I don't have to smoke this plant.
Right.
My pleasure.
Thanks.
My pleasure, folks. Get the picture in the back there too? I saw the angle, I shouldn't have asked.
Can you just hold that back up?
Oh, see?
Set a press conference. You hold up a couple derivatives.